Selma is an emotional journey that takes us back to the times of racial injustice in the 1960s American society. I was astonished to hear that this is the first cinematographic rendition of Martin Luther King Jr.'s life. This film puts into perspective the personal and physical sacrifices that all leaders made to bring African Americans the right of voting, a right that I believe our generation takes for granted. Although almost every Hollywood adaptation has its fictional spies, Ava DuVernay sticks to the factual accuracy of all the events with sympathetic touch to it. Submerging the audience in the lives of these historical characters complements the almost dry and apathetic factual tone that most documentaries use to tell it. Watching this film opens our eyes to the intimate lives of all the men and women that left behind all they had to fight racial injustice. David Oyelowo's acting really encapsulates King's fierce and empowering persona. The resemblance between the two is indisputable, which buys the audience trust and confidence to redefine our view on King's life. Oyelowo not only represents a leader, but also represents a husband, a father, and a loyal friend. These are very human traits that we almost neglect when we talk about King and his legacy. So let's analyze King's lives from a different perspective. As a friend, King always talks with respect but also imposes character when needed. He is a great listener and even better speaker. However, he would rather sit in a room and let everyone talk before he ends a conversation with a sentence that leaves everyone in deep thought. As a father, I was actually curious to see that the film generally never shows his kids, only in a few scenes, and they're shown in a few shots, but never really focused for too long. So I would like to see more of that um, side of him. However, as a husband, King's flaws are never neglected in this film, and they shine through when he talks to his wife. King can be one of the best public speakers in the world, in history, but he can hardly talk to his wife with the same voice. There is a scene in the movie when his wife asks him if he loves her, and he struggles to reply yes. And she asks if there's any other woman in his life, and words simply don't come out of his mouth. The dynamic between the couple is one of the most interesting aspects of this movie, simply because it exposes King's weaknesses. When we all expect him to be glorified and always be pictured as a perfect human being. Cinematography and editing. Um, Lighting is overall warm with brown shadows and yellow highlight tints. Film has a bleach bypass feel with saturated green and pastel blues and yellows. The combination of these hues bring a vibrant vintage feel to the movie. Although many lighting techniques are used, three-point lighting, chiaroscuro, and rim light to just name a few, it is never harsh. It is soft enough that it replicates natural lighting, such as windows, dimmed lamps, and gloomy skies. However, I did notice that editing does change throughout the movie, especially when white people are portrayed. The presence of colder and brighter colors, such as white and blue, are more dominant in these scenes. I would classify Selma as a violently graphic film. However, it uses just enough of it to help the audience pick a side and antagonize those that act with injustice. During moments of violence, slow motion is used to magnify the moment of impact, followed by the exquisite sound effects that really translate the visual pain into the audience's skin. Another recurring pattern is that the most shots I noticed cut off after or before the moment of impact. This turns out to be, in my opinion, more effective since it leaves up to the audience to complete the scene in our heads. This actually helped a lot in certain scenes, such as the death of a white pastor, which I'll talk about a bit more later in this video. Some example shots include the bombing of the house at the beginning of the movie, where the children die, and in this scene, slow motion close-ups of the falling children just roll through, and then it concludes with a bird's eye shot of the overall destruction of the building burying them. However, I think that no unnecessary violence was used. Everything was meticulously shown to portray that not even the naive ones were safe in this society. Lastly, another shot that put me in the actor's shoes was the fall of a woman. She was tackled in a Pacific protest. The shot covers only her torso, and the camera is strapped to her as she falls, adding a sense of vertigo that really makes the viewer feel the moment of impact when she hits the ground. In terms of framing and composition, Selma uses unbalanced rule of thirds to frame two subjects at the same time, placing one of them at the dead middle of the scene and another one next to the edge of the frame. This is then balanced with the background. During the climax of the movie, black leaders are ready to jump into the march, and someone says,
"Be in danger, but we're going to be strong if we stick together. Don't fight back. It's a non-violent movement. Non-violence is not passive. It's actually very strong."
As opposed to the white leader who says,
"This is Alabama. They keep their ass in Washington, D.C. You don't tell us how to live our lives."
This really juxtaposes the intentions of both sides and puts into perspective the advantage that one side had on the other. Another scene I was really captivated about was the execution of a white priest. It begins with them being attacked by two other white men, and then it fast forwards to when King receives the news from one of his men. When King asks how badly they were injured, the director cuts back into the scene when their priest is executed. This builds great suspense and plays with time to deliver a great course of events. Overall, Selma is a great film that I wish my history teacher showed us in high school, because it really fills a gap. It takes mundane moments of life and it applies the injustice and details that made life a bit more difficult, or really difficult actually, for African Americans. Ava DuVernay manages to glorify King through his flaws, which is not an easy task knowing that he's a really important historical character. From a personal perspective, I have lived through strikes and civil disobedience in Venezuela, and this movie really accurately depicts what it's like to be mistreated by authorities in general. It is a really empowering and moving in speech and theme, and I really recommend watching it even if you're not familiar with American history. The historical accuracy and introduction of characters such as Malcolm X, the president, and the governor really brings me back to when I was reading the textbook in history class and discussing it with peers. So I really recommend you watch this movie.